it do, KTTeeV? This is KT, and I'm coming at you live with another episode of the Daily K Podcast. And on today's episode, we have Dr. Shari Day from Everyday Psychology. How you doing today, Dr. Day?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm okay. Just working and surviving.
Nice. I think that's what we're all out here trying to do.
So, I first want to say just thank you for taking some time out today. I know it's a full work day, and now we're here, so thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I enjoy doing things like this.
As we get into things, can you give us a little bit of background about your work and how Everyday Psychology came about?
Of course. So I am a clinical psychologist, studied as a clinical psychologist, licensed here as a clinical psychologist, and I'm also the key consultant for Everyday Psychology. And so Everyday Psychology is an LLC that I developed that basically focuses on being able to bring mental health outside of those four office walls and into the community. It was a response of seeing the need of mental health and wellness in communities of color. And what we know is that oftentimes people who look like us, people who look like me, I'll say, oftentimes they may never enter a therapy office. And so I think there's so many great skills and strategies that can be learned through practicing mental wellness that I think it's important to not just sit back and wait for people to come and get it, but to take it into the community to be able to address the need that's in the community and, without having them come into therapy. So.
And that is a good point. So as we do this and we're going through these times, have you seen a uptrend in therapy at this point, or is it kind of still the same?
There's definitely an uptrend in the need for therapy. I think seeking therapy has been a little bit more difficult, of course, because we can't go into offices. And so there's been a lot of virtual therapy. A lot of therapists or psychologists that I know are trying to convert things into a more virtual world. Oftentimes that can come with a lot of different restraints as far as ethics and things like that. But I will say that our field is doing a really good job of releasing some of those constraints and really trying to make sure that we are there to meet the need, because people, especially during this time, are reaching out, which is a good thing. It's something that is definitely, needed. And so I'm happy that they are.
Yes. And as we look at that, and we talk about going online, how have you adapted business and how's it going?
Yeah. So I've adapted business. So my 9 to 5, I am fully virtual. So I was already doing virtual business before. But with Everyday Psychology, I've been doing a lot of virtual work as well. So I've been doing Zoom meetings. I've been doing Skype meetings, or, a lot of just phone calls and things like that to check in with people. And it's been helpful. It's definitely not the same. And as a therapist, I, put that on the table. It's not the same as sitting in a therapy office. But it is something that you can still have that connection with a therapist, with someone who you can talk to. So it does still give you that holding space that a lot of people need during this time. And so that's something that I really try to focus on, putting that on the table and talking a little bit about it. And asking people, do you feel comfortable with this? Is it helpful in this format? And a lot of people say that it is.
You think it's one thing to be, I definitely could see the difference, because it's one thing to be just you and the therapist inside of the office. But then, you have the family and you got noise, you got distractions. Then you're trying to move so nobody listen to you, because you're probably talking about them.
And I try to talk about that during that first virtual meeting. I try to talk about, this is your time. This is your space. I still hold it for you. And so, I understand that, everybody may not have childcare, or they may not be able to fully pull away from their family. But I do really talk about what are some ways that you can claim this space for you. And we brainstorm. I may say, do you have, if you need to bring the kid in the room with you, is it okay if they sit on the other side of the couch? Do they have to sit in your lap?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes people don't feel fully comfortable with talking about certain things with their children in the room, right? Or I will say, if you have a partner, is it okay to ask them or to plan a 30-minute session so that you can trade off and have this time for yourself? And so I'll try to like brainstorm with people to see if they can really set aside the time, because it's not about me just wanting that space for us, but it really does mean something to be able to set aside a little bit of time for yourself once a week or twice a week or however many times you need.
Very important to set aside that
Yeah.
time. And so, therapists are, in my opinion, some of the strongest people in the world. Because yes, I mean you carry a lot. You carry what you're going through, and then as much as we want to try to detach from work, as an administrator in the school, I take a lot of it home.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
so then for you, what was the moment you said, I will go into psych and just listening to people? Like what drove you to that?
Right. So it's a really weird, well, I'm not going to say it's a weird story, but I knew in the seventh grade that I wanted to be a psychologist. It was for all the wrong reasons. So I had a teacher who talked about going to her therapist, and she basically was like, I pay my therapist $150 an hour. And I was like, I want to do that. Like, I want to do that job. But, in later in high school and into college, I was able to take courses in psychology, and learn more about like human behavior and motives and how, why people do the things that they do. And I just became fascinated with just human beings and the way that we connect with one another, the way that we connect with ourselves. And then on top of that, how systems and how culture and upbringing play a role in all of that. And so it really drew me in. When I first started graduate school, when I first started into psychology kind of long term, I was a researcher. And so I did a lot of research, which was exciting. It was good to create knowledge. But I didn't feel like that was enough. I felt like it left a gap. Like, I'm creating all of this knowledge, I'm researching all of these things, but there are still people who are hurting and still people who are struggling. How do I connect that to the human condition? And so early into my graduate career, I switched over to like more practicing, more therapy, and loved it, really enjoy connecting, really enjoy, helping people walk through journeys. I consider, being a therapist one of the most rewarding things that I can do with my life. People allow me to walk through parts of their life, every day. They tell me things that maybe they've never even mentioned to other people that are close to them, or never even mentioned to themselves. And so, it's definitely an honor, but it is, it's heavy at times. There are moments where it's rough. But I think it's definitely, like I said, a rewarding job. So
That's awesome. And I always like to ask that question when I'm talking to someone, because a lot of the times we decide what we want to be in seventh grade and fifth grade. And so, because I decided I wanted to be a teacher in fourth grade. And so then, you think it just goes all those years, because I don't think I became a teacher until like 28 or something.
Yeah, right. It goes forever, And I often say, so I think I was born to be, when we talk about purpose and meaning, I think like a big part of my purpose and my meaning for being here on earth is to be a healer, right? And here in this society, we call those people like therapists, call those people psychologists. And so, I think, in the seventh grade, I started to realize my purpose, realize meaning. And so it just grew from there, like you said, throughout the lifespan. It just continues to grow and change in different ways. So,
and so as we talk about the quarantine,
yes.
from my view, I'm seeing, students struggling. I'm seeing
Yeah.
parents who now understanding how hard teaching is, so now they're struggling.
Right.
We got levels of frustration building. So, what are some of the things that you are seeing that is coming out of the quarantine? And basically, what should we do about it if we're feeling anxiety or stress?
That's a good question. So I've been seeing a lot of different things come from this quarantine. Things that are really, really difficult for people to manage, because I don't think any of us in our lifetime has ever experienced anything like this. It's unprecedented. It's something that is long term. We don't know when it will end. So there's a lot of anxiety that comes out of that uncertainty, that confusion that comes along with that. What is this? And it feels like every day the news is saying one thing and then they come back and they say another thing, and things are changing, and a lot of people feel out of control. And when we as humans feel as though we don't have much control, we start to experience anxiety. We start to experience panic. We start to experience depression, because we feel like, things won't get better. And so a lot of those things have been coming out of this experience of like trying to cope with the quarantine. And then when we put social isolation or social distancing on top of that, people are experiencing a lot of disconnect. There's research that talks a little bit about how the lack of touch for humans can be detrimental to how we feel connected and how it impacts our mood and all of those things, the stay-at-home orders. People are home with in toxic relationships. There's been an increase in domestic violence. And so a lot of stuff is happening right now. And people genuinely do not know how to manage all of it, which is understandable, because like I said, this is unprecedented. We've never had to manage something on this level. And so it's kind of thrown us all out of whack. And so I tend to talk a little bit about like ways to manage it by putting things into perspective. I think oftentimes when we feel uncertain or when we feel overwhelmed, things can seem a lot bigger than what they are. And not to say that this isn't a big thing, because it is, but I think our perspective plays a huge role in how we're going to manage it. And so I talk about knowing that whatever you're experiencing, whatever emotion you're experiencing, whatever feeling you're experiencing, being able to allow yourself to feel that. If you're feeling depressed today, okay, be depressed today. If you're feeling sad, or if you're feeling angry, or if you're feeling anxious, like, do allow yourself to experience that emotion. It's normal. We're in the midst of a crisis. Like, this isn't just a regular I'm at home working type of thing, we're in the midst of a crisis. We're in the midst of something that we haven't experienced. So it's normal to feel all of those. Allow yourself to feel those feelings, and then be able to talk yourself down from those feelings. Feelings aren't supposed to be permanent, right? They change, and that's okay. But being able to say things like, this isn't normal, or this isn't something that I'm used to. This is unfamiliar, but this will pass. This feels overwhelming, but it will not be permanent, right? And so being able to kind of meet those worries and those fears with things like, this will pass, putting it into perspective. Connect to things that bring you like a sense of calm, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed. So I often talk about doing things that are actions that are opposite to your emotions. So if you feel anxious, doing something that will help with calming you. If you feel out of control, doing something that will give you a sense of control. If you feel as though you're not making any progress, do something that gives you a little bit of progress as you go along. And so connecting to things that bring about the emotion that you do want to feel. I often talk about also looking for bright spots, right? So, yes, there is a lot that's going on. There's a lot of sickness, there's a lot of death, there's a lot of uncertainty. Like, we can be honest about those things, but knowing that there are still bright spots that are happening, and oftentimes we have to look for those. So look for bright spots, ways that you can be grateful each and every single day. And then look for things that you can control, right? So I can't control if, when this pandemic is going to end, but I can't control how much I'm exposed to it by wearing a face mask or by washing my hands or like doing some of those things. I can't control, if I don't know fourth grade math, but I can control other things like, okay, maybe I don't know it, but let me phone a friend. Maybe a friend knows it, And so, like, looking for things that you can control that can help with kind of calming some of that overwhelming feeling. So those are some places I start. It's a lot, but, take it one day at a time.
Yes. And that goes into, like you say, doing what you can control. So this is going to be therapeutic. I probably should get a bill for what I'm about to ask you next. But, okay, so many of my friends, including myself, entrepreneurs. And so we say, okay, well, I just can't be at home, doing nothing. So I feel like I have to work. I mean, like, I want to say at the beginning of the pandemic, I was on episode 35. Now I'm on episode 50. And so I really, it's been a lot. It's a lot. And so even with some of my friends, one of my friends is a manager of a popular Houston artist. And so his big thing on the podcast was talking about how you setting yourself up for afterwards. So what can you help us with on being still and just being okay with not working as hard? It's okay.
It's okay. It's really okay. And I can identify with that because when all of this first started, I was in that same space. Like, I was extremely anxious because I felt like I need to produce. Like, I need to do something. I need to create something. I need to be on top of it. Everyday psychology needs to come out of this better than it was before. And it was really overwhelming. Like, I felt extremely anxious. I started to compare and despair, right? I compared myself to other people. I was like, well, they're doing this, I need to do this. And so it was really overwhelming. And my passion started to give me more grief than like product, right? And so I had to do a really big job of trying to make sure that I wasn't pushing myself to be overly productive. Like I said, we're going through a crisis. Our bodies know that we are going through a crisis. Even if we try to ignore it, avoid it, our bodies know that this isn't our everyday normal way of living. And so when our bodies sense some type of like danger or disruption, we start to have what we call like the fight or flight system kicks in. And when that system kicks in, our bodies care about nothing but survival. And so what we're trying to do in that point, or what our bodies are trying to do, is make sure that we're okay. It don't care about your business. It does not care about, how many proposals you finish. It doesn't care about how many emails you send. It cares about keeping you alive. And so in this moment, if we're trying to overly produce, we're literally doing the exact opposite of what our bodies need. And what I had to start doing was listening to my body. And when my body said, I know you haven't produced as much as you want to produce, but you're tired because mentally you've been stressing, go to sleep. I had to start going to sleep, right? And so part of it is being able to give yourself a little bit of grace, being able to say, this isn't a normal time. I'm not just everyday living. I'm in the midst of a pandemic. I'm in the midst of a crisis. And if I can't produce today, I can't produce today, right? So listening to your body, giving yourself grace, and being able to understand that if we're moving a little bit slower, that doesn't mean we're not moving at all. It just means that our bodies are calling for us to put attention elsewhere, into things like making sure we're okay and we're surviving.
because I do go through those things, where I say, okay, I didn't do such and such today, or okay, I gotta
Yeah.
finish this today, or I need to do 2 videos by now. It's
Right.
pressure.
Yeah, like I got to get all this stuff done. And I think it's really important to create a to-do list. That's always important, right? Create a to-do list. If you have 5 things on there, being able to say realistically, in the midst of a crisis, what could I get done, right? So if I am in the midst of like managing things that I've never managed before, so I'm trying to work and I got kids at home and the dogs and everything is here, how much of those 5 things can I manage today? And if it's not all 5 of them, okay, it's not all 5 of them, right? And then after you've created that to-do list and you've kind of etched out what it actually would look like to achieve those things, create a to-done list. Like, what things have you actually accomplished, right? Because if we create only a to-do list, it leaves out the part of you're finishing things, like you're actually doing things. It may not be that you did all 5, but you did 2. And that needs to go on your to-done list so that you can see that, so that you can continue to feel productive, continue to feel accomplished. So,
What a powerful soundbite. Okay.
yeah.
Oh, and so as we get into the podcast, you have the 3 Psychs and a mic.
I do.
Talk to me about the programming of the podcast and what kind of issues do you all address on the show?
So, Three Psychs and a Mic is another initiative from Everyday Psychology. So, I try with Everyday Psychology to bring out like fresh perspectives, ways to bring psychology into the world without feeling as though it's like this old, boring, I'm sick, you heal me type of thing. I try to figure out different ways to like keep it fresh and lively. And so the podcast Three Psychs and a Mic is what's created out of Everyday Psychology's mission. But I do it with 2 of my very best friends who are also psychologists. So it is 3, of course, 3 psychs. So it's 3 psychologists, 3 female Black psychologists, and we are talking about everyday life. We're talking about all types of topics from a psychological perspective. And so it was born out of the fact that we 3 would just go and hang out and like have brunch and just like meet up and cook at each other's houses. And we would have really great conversations about everything. I mean, social media, what's happening on TV, the news, politics. And we would find ourselves talking about it in a way that was still pretty cool and down to earth, but had like these healing sound bites, like you said, like had that in there. And we were like, people need to hear this. Like, not that we're like, people need to hear us talk, but people need to be able to see that mental wellness should be a part of your everyday life. You should always be aspiring to be well mentally. And so we created Three Psychs and a Mic. We cover all types of issues. This last week, we talked about why it's hard to heal after a breakup. We've talked about toxic masculinity. We've talked about struggle love. We've talked about coping with the coronavirus. We've talked about all types of things, how Black client, white therapist, we invite guests on. So it's just a really good platform for us to be able to talk about just day-to-day things that are happening, but with that psychological perspective. And so you guys, if you guys wanted to listen, you can find us on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Google Play. Pretty much wherever you listen to your podcast. You can Google us, and it's 3 Psychs and a Mic. That's the number 3 Psychs and a Mic, and we will come up. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. 3 Psychs and a Mic, and so we just put content out that is focused on mental wellness, especially for communities of color. And it's a fun time. We have fun with it, so we hope our listeners like it too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, what's next for Everyday Psychology and 3 Psychs and a Mic?
So we want to continue bringing psychology and mental wellness beyond the four office walls. So with Everyday Psychology, I am always doing things as far as like talks, things like this, guesting on podcasts. I do a lot of trainings in the community. One last training that I did was with the local church here, talking about how church ministries can be impactful when it comes to suicidal behaviors and how to help communities of color manage suicide. I am just started working with the local gym here to talk about like mind-body connection. So as you're physically working on your physical wellness, how your mental health and your mental wellness plays a role in physical wellness. And so just like I said, trying to like bend the grain a little bit and show people that mental wellness is a part of everyday life.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like that old saying: if you're feeling good, you're looking good.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
As we close it out,
Yeah.
and I really you already have, but I like to leave before I close with something that someone can grab. Um,
Yeah.
like I say, just one good soundbite. If I just chose to run a clip to inspire someone, and
Yeah.
so could you just give me a little bit?
Ooh, it's a lot of pressure. You're like one soundbite. It's a lot of pressure. But no, I would say, especially during this time, it's so important to practice self-compassion and grace, right? I've been on my soapbox of saying, let's decrease the illusion of busy, especially during this time. This is a time where self-care is extremely important. Listening to your body, being aware of what your body needs is extremely important during this crisis and during this time. And so, as we are practicing self compassion and grace, being able to listen to what we need and give ourselves what we need, and then be able to give others what they need as well.
I like that. Thank you for that.
Of course.
When you said the illusion of busy, that reminded me of a friend. Like hard as I was working, she said you ain't doing nothing but being fake busy anyway.
Exactly. Exactly. It's the illusion of busy because if our body is not going to do it, it's just not going to do it. You can sit at a computer for hours, but your body's only going to give you what it's going to give. So stop the illusion of busy. It's okay to relax.
I will take
Yeah.
that. All right. And so can you give the contact information one more time?
Of course, of course. So if you would like to contact me directly, Everyday Psychology, you can email me at 24.7psychology@gmail.com. And those are numbers, so 24 period 7 psychology@gmail.com. If you'd like to contact Three Psychs and a Mic, you can email us at 3psychsandamic@gmail.com. And that's the number 3, psychsandamic@gmail.com. Or you can always look us up on Instagram or Facebook and listen to us on any of your podcast platforms.
Dr. Data, I sure appreciate you for taking some time today. This was awesome.
Yeah, this was good. This was fun.
Yes, thank you so much. And I look forward to listening to Three Psychs and a Mic.
Yay!
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right. This is KT for KTTeeV signing out. 100.